I'm often asked which is the best country for sports bettors. In this video, I'm going to share with you my top 10. Is your country in this list? So before we get into these top 10 countries, let's cover a few things, the considerations. The first one is the number of available betting sites. Obviously, this is going to matter a lot to you. You know what you can get hold of and what you can't. The regulatory situation in that country, the economy, because obviously a strong economy, you know, where people make a lot of money, it means higher limits, higher stakes, or at least it should do. The incentives, you know, to bet, such as bonuses. Any tax situation, that could be personal tax, it could be betting tax, agents, brokers and betting exchanges. Now, agents and brokers, if you don't know, they facilitate bets, but you can't get hold of them from every country. Now, these facilitate bets in Asia as such, so, you know, it's consideration because they're high value options. The payment methods and banking. Now, banking, just to touch quickly on that, is, you know, if you can easily move money around between your bank account and you're not going to get asked too many questions, basically. So let's crack on with it. Number 10 is going to be the United Kingdom. Now, there's probably a bit of loyalty in me on this one, and also because I know how to bet there. But the first thing is, right, you know, the advantages are obvious. The high number of bookmakers, you've got a lot of different companies. They've all got licenses there, so you can bet with all of them. It's a soft market. It's easy to win. There's betting shops on every corner. In fact, there's been a lot of complaints lately about too many betting shops on each corner. But yeah, and then of course the best of the lot is no taxes on winnings. You know, the HMRC haven't learned a way to sort of take people's money from them if they are professional gamblers. As for the cons, now these are really becoming bigger by the day, but the affordability checks is one of them, and especially since the bookmakers are taking the law into their own hands. Some of the questions that they're coming up with, it's really become beyond prying. You know, they want to know basically more about your personal life than if you was borrowing money for a mortgage. It's also quite hard to get on in the UK. You know, they're used to the wise guys. So in the betting shop, if you walk in, you're not a known face there, you probably are going to stand out as though you're a criminal. But, you know, that's part of life. You need a local license, and there's no real access to Asian brokers. I mean, as you know, the saying goes, where there's a will, there's a way. But let's move on to number 9, and that is Australia. The pros, obviously, is gambling is part of life. Everybody gambles in Australia, almost everybody, should I say, and that makes it become the normal. So there's also the minimum bet rule in racing. That's where bookmakers have to lay you a bet to lose that amount of money or that takeout. There's consumer protection because they're licensed locally, so that means if you did have an issue getting paid out from a bookmaker, or you know they did become problematic, you could take them to court. The extraction process is relatively straightforward, and by extraction process I mean actually winning from bookmakers and then getting paid. Staking size is reasonable in Australia. It's not the richest countries in the world in terms of, you know, what people make per capita, but at the same time it's reasonable, so you can get on a decent sized bet, and that's also because gambling is part of life. And probably one of the best things about Australia is you can use e-wallets. E-wallets, moving money around between accounts, if you are using third-party accounts, is always beneficial. The cons obviously are the limited number of sports books, because not every bookmaker wanted a license in Australia, and there is no access to Asian accounts in this particular instance, you know, as I mentioned before about the brokers and such. Yeah? So you can get hold of them if you know the ways, but on the legal means it is probably difficult. So number 8 is Canada. Now, the pros on Canada are they lifted the ban on betting in 2021. Betting brokers do accept Canadians, and there's plenty of choice. You know, bookmakers are trying to get an hold on the market, so, you know, they are incentivizing as such. And also, Canada is basically tax-free. Now, the negatives or the cons is that each province regulates itself. So, for example, if you're in Ontario, even though they license more bookmakers than anywhere else, there is no Pinnacle in that state. So, that's one issue. You can't go overseas to get the Pinnacle account. The verification process can be overzealous. Anything with Trudeau leading the way, it's always going to be the case, I suppose. And there's e-wallet restrictions as well in place. So, that's Canada in a nutshell. Number 7, this one might surprise a few of you, is Norway. Now, the pros is that since 2010, you've been allowed to bet abroad. And that basically means you can also get hold of the iValue brokers and agent accounts as well as the day-to-day accounts, right? And because it's probably one of the highest income countries in the whole of the world, it means limits are going to be a little bit bigger. Where they're used to people holding the cash, then they're used to them betting bigger, which means bigger limits. The negatives is even though you're allowed to bet abroad, they don't want you to do it from banks. You can't transfer money from a bank to a betting company, so the bank will block you on that one. And the debit and credit card is the same thing. Skrill and Nutella left Norway, but on a positive, there are other methods used for Norwegians to get their money down. And also, you supposedly report taxes for anything that you make over 10,000. That's 10,000 kroner, which is about 900 euro from my understanding. But again, if you are doing it professionally, 28% is not even a big deal if you made a lot of money by the end of the year. So number 6 is Italy, or the land of spaghetti as I call it. Yes, because that's the way I see the betting there also. The pros are pretty obvious, right? You can still get a big bonus from Italian bookmakers. E-wallets are in use. So, if you are setting up third-party accounts, you can transfer money from your own account to another e-wallet, into the bookmakers, back again, and do the old process. So, it's easy to do the sort of circle of processing a bet, right? There's plenty of soft bookmakers on the market, and getting third-party accounts is relatively straightforward. Once you've got somebody getting the accounts for you there in Italy, the prices, for a set of ID or agreements is probably 700-800 euros, so it's much lower than it would be in other countries. Yes, there's no betting taxes as such, and regulation is in place. If you do have problems, you can report these bookmakers. You could take them to court. It might be a long process, but at least you've got that option. The negative is that there's no brokers as such, facing Italy, because quite frankly, they wanted to have a European Union license. Yes, but at the same time, there's obviously ways and means to get around that. But if you are in Italy, then no brokers are directly facing you. And the other thing is, of course, betting limits, because it's a bit of a sort of low economy country. The betting limits, they'll probably start looking at you if you got too excited with your level of stake. So number 5, this is a country I would like a lot. Actually, I would be quite happy to live in New Zealand and place my betting from there, because there's a lot of pros. And the main one is there's a massive legal loophole to bet with most books in the world, right? There's enough incentives in place also, so these people are trying to attract these companies, should I say, trying to attract the New Zealand market. Agents, brokers, they accept Kiwis, and you can even bet direct with companies like Pinnacle Sports and so on. But of course, the negative is, if they're not licensed within the country itself, then there's no recourse to courts if they do not pay you. It's just one consideration, because you do come across it now and then as a professional gambler, especially if you're betting with companies that you don't know much about, right? And also, maybe the staking sizes, you'd want to be a little bit careful about how much you was putting on from a place like New Zealand, because the average salaries are probably lower than in some of the countries in the world, and so it was just one consideration. Number 4, I guess this one really surprises quite a few people, is Sweden. I mean, the land of the smorgasbord, right? But the pros are really obvious, right? There's 60 licensed bookmakers, betting exchanges are licensed there. Because of the average Swede makes a good income, it's a higher limit bookmakers, accounts, right? So, recently we've been talking about Bet365, what you can get out of them in different countries, and in the UK you'd be lucky to get like 3,000 or 4,000 out of them before they started looking at your account. There's people in Sweden, they're getting 15,000 or 20,000 out of a Bet365 account before it gets busted. Yeah, so bear that in mind. Also, e-wallets, moving money around from account to account, much easier, and as such there's no real personal betting taxes. Now that can become obviously problematic if you are doing that as your main source of income and how you'd want to declare it, but because Sweden are pretty hot on taxes, but as such in the term of the law, there is no personal betting taxes as such, right? The negative is no Asian brokers. For some reason, a lot of Asian brokers swerve Sweden. There is one or two that will accept you there, especially actually one of them is Swedish facing purely, but they're doing it through Malta. That's why it's a little bit different to the traditional Asian broker. So for number 3, I'm going to go with the USA. Now this one is really a bit of a dilemma because the pros are the ones that really stand out is you're going to get a massive bonus there without a big rollover, without a requirement. It's very, very easy to take money from US facing sports books at the moment, and the reason for that is all these bookmakers are trying to capture the market, so they're incentivizing you with massive bonuses, and they're all competing against each other to get hold of the players, and you can take advantage. It's a relatively easy validation process there as well because of the way they run their social security system, their ID cards as such, right? Gives you some kind of legal protection. You only have to mention a lawyer to any American company and they normally pay out pretty quickly. Lazy lines, even though we're not talking about the best margins in the US, bookmakers are well known to be pretty slow in changing the odds, and getting accounts is relatively simple. You've got a population of over 200 million, and a lot of them don't even understand the first thing about betting, so it'd be easy to tap them up and get hold of them doing betting accounts, especially if they wanted to pay for their college education or whatever, try to recover some kinds of money along the way. The negatives in the US are personal tax, right? You are subject to tax on any kind of winnings, any kind of profits that you make in life, even if you're buying and selling cars on the side, you still be liable to tax in the theory of Uncle Sam anyway. So, personal tax. But again, that's not a problem. If you can win $1 million there and 100,000 somewhere else, you're quite happy to give up 30%, aren't you? Right? No Asian brokers are facing the US, but again, like I say, there's ways and means, isn't there? The limited number of sports books, but that's growing every day, and also the exchanges are starting to come, and you'll probably see some racing eventually there, as opposed to at the moment it all going through the totalizator system, and the margins are pretty high as well. So they're betting minus 110 still, which is like 1.91 in the best of 2 sports, which is for most of us are pretty weak, but again, there's ways to sort of catch them out if you know what you're doing. So number 2, I guess this is like a big shock to anybody that's looking at it, and that's Finland. And the reason is really simple. International sites, legally accessible. You get a good first-time deposit bonus. In fact, they love Finnish punters because they are used to. Finnish punters do like betting, and they want to incentivize them. They want to get them on board. So the first-time deposit bonus is relatively good. Betting exchanges are allowed. Asian broker services are allowed. E-wallets are allowed. It's liberal for now, which is quite a surprise. If you think of a country like Finland, because it's very Germanic in the way it sort of processes day-to-day life as such. But as for cons, really, honestly, I just can't think of any, so I'm not going to even mention any for Finland. Where there's a will, there's a way. You can do literally anything you wish to from Finland, as long as you do it through the proper channels and the proper means, yes? And finally, I guess this one really isn't a surprise one if you've been watching my other videos, and that's Malta. back in the day when Malta started licensing bookmakers, they didn't allow them to take bets off of the locals. So eventually that had to change because of all the other European countries complaining about it, and especially the EU. So then it became a bit like the Wild West, and literally anything goes in Malta. You can access all bookmakers from there. Banking works. Okay, you've got a massive population of people that are working for sports betting companies there, but everything works. You know, it's an easy setup if you want to set up a proper business there and do it like as a consultancy agency, and you know, you wish to run big funds through bank accounts. So, you know, I would definitely suggest Malta's definitely of interest to the typical person. They can be a bit awkward on a few things, but the only negatives that I see is I personally wouldn't want to live in Malta. I think it's a bit of a S-hole, but there you go, everybody to their own. And you know, it's an island, so the internet connection has good and bad days, right? But yeah, that sort of sums up Malta. Anything goes from there, and you can also get a lot of help from in a country like Malta. So the last thing I just want to really sort of pick up on these different countries, I haven't included anything in Africa, and that's mainly because of the schmozzle of the market there. You know, I mean, it's low-income countries, and but anybody who's really sort of ambitious can make money in places like Africa. You know, I've not mentioned Moldova because where the average salary is like $150, $200 a month. It's obviously no interest to professional punters as such, but it is legal from there, so that's another alternative. And I could even throw in Brazil, in South America and Argentina. You know, you can literally do anything from there. But again, you know, they're probably going to be saying to you, if you start wanting to bet 2,000 or 3,000 on a game, they might be asking why and how can you do that if you are from those sort of countries. So there you go. That's all I basically want to say. So thanks for watching. Like and subscribe. I'm going to link up a couple of interesting other subjects for you, other videos you can watch, and yeah, get over to our site and leave a message if you've got any opinion of what is going to be better. See you soon. Take care for now. Bye bye.